You're listening to 91 Reasons, a journey into the twisted landscape of pop culture. Keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times. And now, the voice, Jeff Tucker.
All right, here we return. It is almost Christmas here, and here I am talking about Dreamworks movies in part 2 of the exhaustive look at all the Dreamworks animated films. We talked last episode about the formation of Dreamworks and how it came to be after Katzenberg left Walt Disney Animation. He left on not so good terms, and I think that when we talked last time, it was pretty clear that the slate of movies that Dreamworks decided to put out were designed to siphon away eyeballs from Disney and Pixar movies, and also a little bit probably of Katzenberg trying to show up, like, hey, I can do what you can do. In fact, I did do what you do now, and I did it better, and I'm going to do it better over here. So as DreamWorks Animation continued, they along with Disney and Pixar and Blue Sky to some degree, they really turned animation into a much more common thing than it used to be. When I was a kid, animated movies didn't come out every year. How it normally worked was you'd get an original animated movie, usually Disney. Sometimes there were other ones. You know, there were notable exceptions like Amblin putting out An American Tail, which felt just like a Disney movie because it was Don Bluth, or Secret of Nim from MGM, or Amblin also did Land Before Time, which became a phenomenon of really perfecting the direct-to-video sequel. I think they're up to like Land Before Time 30. But animated movies were not every year. Sometimes you got a reissue. Like there were a lot of years where Disney, before home video really took off, Disney was very hesitant to put out movies for home use because they knew once it hit home video, they weren't going to get any more theatrical money out of these films. So they were really hesitant to put them out. And that's where the Disney Vault came from, as far as putting a movie out for a short window and then pulling it back on, putting it on moratorium and trying to drive sales for a short period. And I'm sure that worked for them, but all it really did was create a very healthy secondary market for people who were willing to either bootleg them or buy them and put them in a closet and then sell them. But those were events. I mean, look at Jungle Book, was released in the 60s, didn't come out on video till 90, 91, you know. Like, the home video explosion was 85, 86. And you wouldn't get some of these Disney classics like Snow White, Fantasia, for years after that. Disney held on to those things for years. And that was because they were re-releasing them to theaters, because that's what the model was. The model was people went to the theaters to see movies, and that's where all the money was. Home video changed all that. And as soon as home video really took hold and Disney figured out how to do that, they were the kings of that as well. And then, you know, branding themselves Disney DVD and then Disney Blu-ray with platinum and diamond editions. And the model has now become, instead of re-releasing it to theaters, you just re-release it on disc with new bonus features and blah, blah, blah. Oh, all except for Song of the South, right? You ever heard of Song of the South? That's the 1940s Disney movie that has Brer Rabbit and Brer Bear. Splash Mountain is based on it, and Zippity Doo-Dah, arguably one of the most famous Disney songs of all time, comes from it, but you can't get it on home video. It was only released one time in America, either late 84, early 85. I worked at Multivideo. They had one copy, and it was always checked out. And once it died, there wasn't no replacement, because Disney figured out pretty quick that the attitude around Song of the South had changed drastically, and that some things weren't just they weren't palatable anymore. And the main beef with Song of the South is that Uncle Remus, who narrates the story, is actually happy being a slave. and that's why it's deemed offensive, because it's a product of its time, and it's not going to work. And I know that just a couple of years ago, Bob Iger, when he took over for Eisner, one of his first things was, how do we get this movie into the market? How do we make money off of it? Because audiences certainly want it, but we can't put it out without risking offending a lot of people. So the rumor I heard was that they had gotten Denzel Washington to record a new intro, putting the film in its historical context. And even that, at the last minute, they were like, you know what? It's just too volatile. So, no, it's not coming out. So I don't think we'll ever see Song of the South, you know? It's just one of those bizarre movies that can't seem to find a way to be released without some people losing their minds over. Because, you know, when they released Fantasia on video finally, they edited quite a few little short snippets out during the centaur scene. There's a pretty racist stereotype centaur that's doing the centaur's hooves or something. It's really racist. And they also cut out a couple of shots of the nymphs topless. So, hey, Disney was really pushing the envelope back in the day, both stereotype-wise and sexual-wise for Fantasia. Because, you know, Fantasia was supposed to be this movie that got re-released every couple of years with some scenes taken out and some new scenes put in. And it was supposed to be this project that was never finished. But, you know, when Fantasia came out, people just didn't get it. They wanted a linear story, not abstract imagery put to music. And it would take a long time before Fantasia really became the classic that it's known as today. You know, along those lines, I don't know a lot of kids that'll even sit through Fantasia. You know, I would sit through it because I remember going to the theater for one of those re-releases. So I have fond memories of that. But the movie itself, to me, yeah, it is art. But it's more like background art. Like you put the Blu-ray on and then you're doing Christmas crafts or something. I don't know. You know, there's no doubt that there's a reason the Sorcerer's Apprentice with Mickey Mouse is always the one that you see, because that's the most recognizable icon in the film. Even though to me, as a kid, Night on Bald Mountain was the best because it was dark and scary and not at all what you got from a lot of Disney cartoons. But, you know, home video did kill the re-release. We've seen a resurgence in the last few years of movies getting re-released simply because with digital delivery, you don't have to make a print. And that's where all the money would come from. Back, you know, not that long ago, just a few years ago, like if Rachel and I saw a reissue of Clerks, and that meant there had to be a print struck or a print found, driven to the theater, loaded in the projector, and here we go. Digital, you're just downloading it from the studio. So that's why we've seen a resurgence of a lot of older movies getting re-released. And I'm all for it. If it means that I get to see a movie that I really enjoy back on the big screen, Back to the Future, Raiders of the Lost Ark, I'm all about it. I think that's a great idea. And that was the final come to fruition promise of the 20-screen megaplexes back when they started building them. Well, it's so that we can show first-run movies and art house movies and reissue movies. Well, they didn't do it, but finally it's happening. You know, they're event tickets, and what a great idea. But when DreamWorks was founded, and we're back to DreamWorks, they were going to put out a steady supply of animated product. So a lot of these films were put into production quite early because animated movies take years. They're very time consuming, painstaking, you know, talk about moving at a snail's pace. But that's animation, and you have to have a passion for it. And there's no doubt that Jeffrey Katzenberg has huge passion for animated movies. You know, he's responsible for some of the finest. Him and John Lasseter are responsible for some of the finest animated movies of the last 25 years, longer, 27, 28. So there's no doubt he's very into it. So when he founded DreamWorks, they imagine how many meetings this guy must have attended to get all of these movies set up and up and going with voice casting and animation and rendering and production design and character design so that they could put out product year after year after year. I mean, it takes forever. Even if you are doing a sequel, even if you're doing a sequel and you're like, well, they've got the character models right in the computer. Well, that doesn't always work. Look at Toy Story 1, 2, and 3. For each one, the first one is a masterpiece. Second one, even more so. But they had to upgrade the character models to match the changing technologies. And you know what? Have a marathon. Put 1, 2, and 3 on. You'll be shocked at how different Buzz and Woody look from the 3 films simply due to technology. It's like trying to watch first season Simpsons. The first season of Simpsons, the animation is so archaic as to be comical, as to be hard to watch, especially on a high-def television. So they were working pretty hard at DreamWorks to get their movies out. And I know that they found their audiences because the box office grosses are undeniable, that people wanted to see these movies, that people saw these movies again and again and again and bought them on every conceivable form of home video. They're not for me. It's hard to find DreamWorks product that I enjoy. The Aardman ones seem to be the exception. The homegrown DreamWorks films, maybe they're just appealing to a younger audience or a hipper audience. I'm willing to admit I'm not a hip guy, and I don't get all the reason why we have all these modern day pop culture references in these movies, because once the film leaves theaters, it's completely dated. The music is so dated. The references are dated, It'd be like watching Fox and the Hound or Great Mouse Detective and having him do a Where's the Beef reference. It would just be odd. But that's what we're looking at with these DreamWorks movies, because they have such dated pop culture references. And somebody did, you know what? I know I keep saying this and I forget once the episode is over, but somebody once did a study of the DreamWorks animated character pose and put them all together in a row. I'll see if I can find that, because it's fascinating how each of the characters is marketed the exact same. Like, it's such a cookie cutter assemblage of marketing materials, which is it's just funny. But I guess, again, if the formula is working, who would change it? Who's to deny that? If people like drinking Coke, why are you going to make new Coke? That's just crazy. Just crazy. So we left off last episode. We had just talked about the first Madagascar film, which, again, I'm not a fan of. I don't particularly care for Ben Stiller. I don't particularly care for Chris Rock. I like Sacha Baron Cohen, but I can't watch the movie. Like, a bunch of smart alecky characters saying smart alecky things to each other. I can't do it. It's the equivalent of the Simpsons episode where Homer goes to the movies and he sees the Julia Roberts film Too Many Grooms, where the minister goes, 1 groom, 2 grooms, but you, oh, my medication. And then this kid with a skateboard pops up and goes, radical. Like, to me, that's a DreamWorks movie. Like, it's just, I'm not hip enough to get these movies. And I'm hip enough to know that I'm not hip enough. So I'm hip, lacking self-aware. There's some sort of acronym I'll have to come up with for what I am, but I truly am. And okay, so 2005 was Madagascar. That's their early release, and then late 2005 they had Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. I'll be honest, I've never seen this film. I have no idea what it's about, other than they have to fight in some rabbit that's turning into a werewolf or something. I don't know. I'm sure if I watched it, I would probably really enjoy it, because the Aardman claymation features, the hands-on stop-motion features, have just a real high-quality look to them. I mean, those guys really know what they're doing. They're as good as Henry Selick as far as stop motion goes. And did you know that during the making of one of the Wallace and Gromit movies, that the guy who's in charge of them, the creator, he was in New York to do some talk show, and he left Wallace and Gromit in a taxi cab. I don't think he ever found it. I think the cab guy drove off and was like, what's going on? These guys left a box of a guy and his dog and a clay, and who knows? Maybe he gave him to his kid. Could you imagine? Could you imagine getting the actual Wallace and Gromit clay figures with armatures in them? And I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine what that would be like. I would give it back. I would be so terrified. I'd call the studio and give it back and hope for some sort of, tiny reward or something. I don't know. But their next film, 2006. Gosh, it doesn't seem like it's been that long. 2006. We're coming up on 9 years since Flushed Away. Flushed Away, man. Oh, not Flushed Away. I'm sorry. I take that back. Over the Hedge. Over the Hedge. Now, Over the Hedge was based off of there was some source material. I think it was a comic strip or a comic book, and it was about animals living in the forest next to a house, and they go in and find, again, it's one of those movies where all they did was hire a bunch of well-known celebrities, in this case Bruce Willis and Paul Giamatti, who I'm a huge fan, uber fan of Paul Giamatti. But I remember watching it, and he plays, Bruce Willis plays Rocky the Raccoon or something, and he likes all the food in the People House, and the exterminators trying to get rid of him, and it was just really a really by the numbers talking animal movie. How many talking animal movies do we have to have? Everything's a talking animal. And I know it's because we're still working on how to do a realistic human being animated character. Although I have no problem with the masterpiece that is The Incredibles. The Incredibles, after about, I'm going to guess 5 or 6 minutes in, you just accept that they're real people. And I think that's the combination of very high quality animation and even higher quality voice work by Craig T. Nelson and what's her name from the piano? I can't think of her name, but I really like her, and I think everybody in The Incredibles is just completely amazing. Holly Hunter is her name. I want to say Helen Hunter. I'm like, no, it's Helen Hunt. Holly Hunter, fantastic. But anytime they try, those human creatures human people are stylized. If you're talking about Polar Express or Final Fantasy, no, they look like robots. They look like dead corpses being forced to move around by forces unseen. And the uncanny valley, which is a scientific term for when your brain, you're trying to believe that these people are real, but your brain knows something is off. You're in the uncanny valley because nothing quite looks right. The eyes don't quite look right. It doesn't quite match up. And that's certainly Final Fantasy and Polar Express, But, yeah, what a bummer. Over the Hedge, just more talking animals. Animals that are smarter than us and are hip. And, just imagine the raccoon going, radical! I'm done, okay? And then the next film of that year, late 2006... This one didn't do very well. This one had a budget of $149 million and only made Isn't that funny? You can say only when you're talking about $178 million. You're still saying, well, only $178 million. Flushed Away. Now, sorry about that. I was choking for a second there. I'm choking on these terrible animated movies. They're actually going to physically kill me. They're so bad. But Flushed Away is an Aardman production with Ian McKellen and I think Kate Winslet and Hugh Jackman in the title role. And it's one of those weird kind of Pixar-esque movies where it presents you with an alternate reality. This time it's some sort of rat or mouse character, and they have a complete society based on puns and clever ways of using things. And this would rank higher on my list, except this is Aardman doing computer animation, and it just, to me, it doesn't look right. Like, I'm just not into it. I don't like the way the characters look. I think each of the main characters is grotesque looking, and they're just not, they don't have the Aardman charm that Wallace and Gromit and Chicken Run had. They just don't. And I never really got into this. And they also lose valuable points because they had a very successful McDonald's promotion for Flushed Away. And I know that because whenever I go to the thrift store or the swap meet, even now, nearly 9 years later, you can still find Flushed Away toys in bags and piles. Like, every kid must have gotten these toys, and they've all been jettisoned. Nobody has any affinity for these characters, any affinity for these movies, and no, it's just not my thing. And I know I sound like a broken record. Like, I know you're listening going, Jeff, you hate all of these movies. Well, I do. I do hate all of these movies. But it's important that we talk about them in order so that when we get to the ones I really hate, we can amp up and be more excited and filled with more venom and hatred for some of these movies. Isn't that crazy? Like, why do I care? I don't know. Why do I care? I think it's because, now, if I was an adult without kids, I wouldn't care about these crap fests. But because I have kids and they're marketed at kids, a lot of times they work. Like my kids dragging me to Shark Tale, or my son Austin, who is mortified that when he was 3 years old, had to have Shrek horns on his head and would only answer if we called him Shrek. And this lasted for 5 or 6 long, tedious months. But, you know, I was caught up in the thick of these movies because of my kids, where it's marketed to them on movie trailers, commercials, Happy Meal toys, the toy aisle itself, and it's hard to escape them. So you end up having an opinion because they're just around you. You're just steeped in it, you know? Ugh. Flushed Away. And what a gross title. Like, I know it actually refers to the fact that he falls in a toilet and gets flushed away. But Flushed Away, maybe not the best title. You know, we all have to go to the toilet. And we don't need a movie that's named like, you know, the toilet movie. Or even the connotation that we're going to have to venture down the toilet bowl with them. Like, really? Give me a break. And you know what? The box office reflects that. So I'm not in the minority here. I am in the minority when it comes to the next film in their artillery, and that's 2007's Shrek the Third, which should have been the last one. It should have. Isn't 3 movies enough to say about Shrek? Is it 3 movies and a couple of holiday specials, and I'm sure there was an ice show, and there was a Broadway musical? Haven't we said enough? Like, can't we just say by the third one, you know, Merry Christmas, everybody. We're going to do you the favor of never having this character appear again. But that's not to be. But Shrek the Third, look at this. Budget of $160 million, and it grossed almost $800 million at the box office. $800 million. Like, who went to see this movie? Oh, I know. Everybody. This is the one with Justin Timberlake as King Arthur. And, oh boy, Shrek the Third. What's to say about Shrek that I haven't said already, except that it's another way to make money off Mike Myers' Scottish voice, and another film to line the pockets of Cameron Diaz, and the continual downward spiral of Eddie Murphy into family movie gutter. And Shrek Shrek the Third. Isn't that great? Ugh. Okay, the next film, 2007, late 2007. So this is the second movie of that year. B-Movie. B-Movie. I took my kids to see B-Movie to the theater. See what I said about sometimes the marketing works, the commercials that bombard you. And remember, this is all before DVRs were abundant, so you're still watching commercials. And B-Movie had so many commercials. They had a trailer with all the actors live action in B costumes, you know. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Matthew Broderick, you know, they're all in B costumes. And the big thing of the trailer was Jerry Seinfeld's character saying, you know, something wasn't working, so they were going to go to Plan B. Plan B. That's the signature line of the trailer, and guess what? It's not in the movie. Even my kids picked up on that. They're like, hey, that funny scene from the trailer is not in the movie. And that's different than if you're talking about how the Pixar movies have actual snippets for the trailers that are not in the movie. You know, Mr. Incredible putting on his costume and the belt buckle exploding around the room is not in the movie. It was made just for the trailer. They do that a lot. DreamWorks, not so much. So seeing that in the trailer but not in the movie was kind of like, oh, okay, all right. But this was the big Jerry Seinfeld animated, him and Renee Zellweger. And, you know, I know a lot of people who really like this movie. And I'll try to argue with them, and they'll go, you know, Jeff, you just don't know what it's like to suspend disbelief. And I go, okay, all right, you may have a thing about that, you know. Sometimes the ludicrousy of the plot, I can't figure out how to wrap my head around it. That you are right in this. But B-Movie's even bigger than that, because it's not about, okay, if you're talking about suspending your disbelief, then you have to accept that in the movie B-Movie, bees have this whole culture, and when Jerry Seinfeld's bee starts talking to Renee Zellweger's human character, we're just supposed to accept the fact that in this planet, they go, well, the bees are sitting it. Okay, they talk. That's it. Nobody raises a ruckus, and the bees launch this rebellion that they're not going to make honey if they're not treated right. And it's like, okay, I don't know what to believe here. The whole thing's ludicrous. Is the bee romancing this woman? Like, what the hell's going on? So when you're talking suspension of disbelief, you're going to lose me right at the get-go. Because a woman can't have an affair with a bee. It's just stupid. It's stupid on every... They can be friends, I guess. But see, the major problem with B-Movie is not the suspension of disbelief. It's the ignorance and the ignoring of their own rules of the movie that they set up. And I've talked about this before. The main reason movies have a problem, when I start talking about movies that have issues, is simply because a lot of them set up the rules of the universe, and this is how we have to play by, and then they just break them because they can't think of any way to get the character out of whatever circumstance they're in, or they're trying to achieve an impossible goal. And here, okay, an example is at the end of The Matrix, Neo is a god. So in the sequel, there's really no way to have any villains that can face off against Neo. So instead Neo starts karate fighting him again and makes some throwaway line about upgrades. Really? That's it? Upgrades? That's all you got? Upgrades? So when you set up the rules of the universe and you just break them, like one day I will get to one of the worst movies of the last 20 years, the remake of the Stepford Wives. The remake of the Stepford Wives, where they forgot what movie they were even making. And it's so painfully obvious watching it that for the first half of the movie, they're replacing their wives with submissive robots. And then at the end of the movie, they're only upgrading them with robotic technology. And they just figure nobody cares. They just figure you're going to the movies, you got your popcorn and your Coke, and if maybe it doesn't make sense, then, screw you. And that's how they feel about it. And they do that in B-movie because they set up a world where they tell you that if a bee stings somebody, he's going to die. So that at the end, when Matthew Broderick's bee character stings somebody, we're supposed to have this touching death scene. And instead, they replace his stinger with a plastic sword like you serve olives on, and he lives happily ever after. Well, you can't have it both ways, guys. You have to pick what the movie's about, what the rules of the universe are, and you have to stick by them. You can't just go, no, we can't kill this guy. We need him. And maybe that's DreamWorks' problem all through it. Because we're getting to a couple of really big offenders of that. But, whatever. B-movie. I probably never even seen it. Although my kids tell me that B-movie is one of those weird Touchstone movies. And I don't mean Touchstone the studio. I mean Touchstone in its basic sense. In that on a lot of social media, Tumblr and some of the other media sites, that B-movie gets quoted all the time. Like it's one of those so bad it's hip to like bizarre movies. And I can believe that, whatever. Anywho, B-movie. I don't recommend watching any of these movies, other than a couple of the Aardman ones. You shouldn't subject yourself to these. And, on that note, I really thought that people would be somewhat upset at the trashing of these movies. But I haven't heard a single person upset with me. Most people are like, oh, yeah, these are terrible movies. Oh, yeah, you're dead on. I'm like, okay. So I'm not in the minority here. A lot of us adults don't like this crap. And how it's sold to our kids and how it clogs up the toy aisle and the Happy Meal collections. And they're just products. They're not, and this is terrible because I know people work on these things for years. But they're not art. They're just made to make money. And I know ultimately everything's made to make money. But the best things that are made to make money are also made to make you feel and live and soar and cry. And I don't get that from any of these. I don't have any soft spot for any of this crap. I just watch it and go, well, this is just selling toys. This is just somebody explaining a Disney or a Pixar movie that's never seen one. And there are exceptions to that on both sides, obviously. Okay, next film, 2008, $150 million budget. $130 million budget. $631 million at the box office. Wow. Kung Fu Panda. Kung Fu Panda. Have you seen this movie? Everybody's seen this movie. And this is the quintessential DreamWorks movie. Because just look, I'm going to click through here because it bears saying what the voice cast of this movie is. Listen to this. Jack Black as the title character, the Kung Fu Panda. Dustin Hoffman as his Yoda, master. Angelina Jolie, Ian McShane, Seth Rogen, Lucy Liu, David Cross, James Hong, and Jackie Chan. Like, that's enough to make 10 movies. And the reason they got all these people to do this movie is they probably had to work a day. Other than Dustin Hoffman and Jack Black, I bet these people worked 1 to 2 days each because their characters barely speak in the movie. And it's like, featuring the voices of, and you're like, oh, you're a joke. That'd be like the commercial for Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves going, starring Sean Connery as Good King Richard. He's in the movie 3 minutes. It's a great 3 minutes and one of the best cameos of all time. But it shouldn't be on the poster. But that's Kung Fu Panda, man. They couldn't wait to tell, at the Cannes Film Festival that all these people were in this movie. And Jack Black's yucking it up again. And again, this is another movie, just like Shrek, that was in production over a decade because the original voice of Kung Fu Panda was, again, Chris Farley, who died in 1997. Boy, Farley had all these projects lined up when he died of his drug overdose. What an idiot. I know he idolized John Belushi, but give me a break, man. Live fast, die young. No, okay, there you go. Thanks a lot, dude. Thanks a lot. You subjected us to Mike Myers' Scottish voice, and in this one, Jack Black. Thank you. I am not a fan of Kung Fu. I'm not a fan of any of these movies. I know I sound like a broken record. Kung Fu Panda, man. We get it. He's a big fat guy who can do Kung Fu because anybody can do it if you put your mind to it. Marty, if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. Yeah, we know. What a great message. That's fabulous. But it's just not for me. God, is it not for me? And he's like, I can't do Kung Fu eating moon dew or whatever. Blah, blah, blah. Jack Black. Jack Black's brilliant when he's the character actor, the sidekick. Or he was good in Be Kind, Rewind, Cable Guy, Mars Attacks. But when he's a lead, he's not my thing. He's just not my thing, So the next film, November 2008, $150 million budget, $600 million worldwide gross. We're talking about Madagascar, Escape to the number 2, Africa. Guess what? I haven't seen this movie. I have no desire to see this movie. I could care less if I never see this movie. It's not my thing. It's not me, man. I can't watch this crap. Talking lions and wisecracking zebras. Hey, I'm Chris Rock, wisecracking, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? Paycheck. All I hear when they talk is a cash register ringing. That's all I hear. Who cares? All right, the next one. $175 million budget, $381 million gross. I would have thought the gross of Monsters vs. Aliens would have been higher if for the only reason that this was the first big 3D movie that I took my family to. This is before Avatar. This was like the new generation of 3D, and it's something to see on the big screen. And I think we ended up paying like $50 or $60 for this for a matinee, and I was shocked at how much it costs. But it was a new way to see a movie. I was willing to pay it. And I wanted to see it because this is the only way to get me in a theater for a Reese Witherspoon, Seth Rogen movie. Like, oh no. This is terrible. That said, Monsters vs. Alien is not a terrible movie. Boy, I'm dropping. I'm actually being a nice guy here. It's not a terrible movie. It has a B movie, 50s B movie sci-fi aesthetic that I like. Kiefer Sutherland, Stephen Colbert, and I talked in the last episode about maybe the most out-of-place ending for a movie ever. And that's Monsters vs. Aliens, because once they've dealt with the plot of what's his name, Rainn Wilson's alien, annihilation of Earth, and once they save the planet, they switch back to the president and his cronies in what is obviously an homage to Dr. Strangelove, which no kid in the audience got. But that's, there are things you have to put in to keep the adults interested, and that's one of them. But at the end of this film, you're not going to believe it when I tell you if you've not seen this thing. At the end of the film, the president inadvertently launches all the nuclear missiles on Earth, the American arsenal. He starts Armageddon. And his way of dealing with it is he kind of looks around at all his advisors and is like, well, who gets to freeze my head? Like, they're putting him in cryogenic freeze. And when the Earth manages to bounce back from nuclear holocaust and they can thaw him out and revive him. That's his place in American history. And I remember thinking, like, why is that in this movie? Why is that the stinger at the end of this movie? The stinger is really blowing everybody and undoing the whole plot of the movie. They saved Earth from aliens so that it could be destroyed by the idiot president of the United States. And I don't know if that was some sort of slam against outgoing President Bush. Who knows? It's Colbert, because anything's possible. Maybe he riffed on it in the studio and they just put it in as a joke. But for a guy like me who takes films as they are and says that this is the movie the filmmaker intended and this is what got released, it begs the question, what were they thinking? What were they thinking? Because I don't know. Bizarre movie. The 3D was good. There were shots of the Reese Witherspoon character who's like a giant woman and Kiefer Sutherland's character who's on a little jetpack talking to her that really looked like, wow, this is a new way of 3D. Yes, the image is a little dark because the glasses are polarized and tinted, but it looks okay. It has depth. It has real depth on the screen. And Monsters vs. Alien is notable for doing nothing if just getting me in the theater to see Avatar, a few months later. Like, well, if it's in that kind of 3D, I gotta go because it's going to be great, right? And yes, the animation in Avatar is amazing if the plot is a little reminiscent of Dances with Wolves. Anywho, their next film is going to... This is the one, folks. This is the beloved film that's going to either have you nodding your head in agreement, nodding your head like, Jeff makes good points, or staring at whatever you're playing this on and saying, that guy's a complete idiot. He's ruining a great movie. And I'm sorry, but these DreamWorks movies do nothing for me. And I don't get the... God, if you look at the... Let's look it over. We're talking about How to Train Your Dragon. $165 million budget, a return of $494 million worldwide. Not bad. A 98% Rotten Tomatoes freshness. 98%. That means I'm the only guy that didn't like this movie. It's a club of one. There's somebody else out there, but he's probably got severe emotional issues. And I wouldn't want to hang out with him. Or he wouldn't want to hang out with me. But I didn't get this movie. This movie had so many problems that I just didn't get it. And I know this puts me in the minority. I get it. I wish I could enjoy this movie like everybody else, because the character design of Toothless is really good. The aesthetic of the film, the Viking landscape, the misty mountains and soaring vistas, it's all very well done. These guys did a really good job, but it's the script and some of the choices that they make in it that cause me to say, what? Okay, first one, glaring. This is so glaring. They present you with a whole host of damaged Viking elders. This is what's the guy's name? Hiccup. Hiccup's father, played by Gerard Butler. He's like, I tell you what, Hiccup, it's so great you're growing up and that you're gonna take over as chief of this tribe. And they got Billy, what's his name? Yuck. That's right. Hiccup's going to take over the whole place, and he's making armor for everybody. I got all the armor for people. I'm the armorer, yeah. And everybody's got really thick, we're going to outdo Mike Myers' Scottish accent. He's got a Scottish one. We've got a better Scottish one because we're really Scots, or whatever we are. And then all the kids are like, well, I don't know, Dad. I'm not sure I want to take over the tribe. Jay Brishel's like, his voice is one notch below pimply-faced teen from Simpsons, Mr. Simpson, And then Jay Brishel's like, oh, I don't know, Dad. And he's like, well, you got to do what you got to do, son. Find your own way, but you're taking over the tribe. I don't know, Dad, if I want to do that and fight the dragons. Okay, we got it. What happens during puberty in this land? How do they go from Americanized teenage voices to thick Scottish brogues in just a couple of years? Like, there's no mention of this? And I get that, okay, just go ahead and say it, Jeff. Say it to the radio. Jeff, it's a kid's movie. Well, that's great. But it doesn't mean it has to make huge gaps in logic. Either they all talk the same way or they don't. But you got people that talk this way and they talk sassy and hip, or Scottish, or whatever. But they should all talk the same. They all live in the same area. You know, give me a break. They took Kevin Costner to task for his awful English accent in Prince of Thieves, but at least in most scenes he was doing one. It wasn't like he's like, well, I'm Kevin Costner, this is the way I talk, and I'm Robin Hood. At least he tried a little bit. Just a little. Oh, my God. But beyond that, the issue I have with How to Train Your Dragon is this. It's a movie about not judging things by its cover and not doing things just because that's always the way we've done things. These are both great messages. These are both life lessons that kids need to learn, that things are not always what they seem. So Toothless falls out of the sky, and Hiccup has to bring him back. And along the way, he learns that not all dragons are bad, and he has to convince his father that they don't have to fight the dragons, that they can work with the dragons. So it's a really expensive and well done, animated-wise, anti-war movie. And there's nothing wrong with that. Except the movie ends with a dragon battle that rivals the X-Wing attack on the Death Star. Well, you can't have it both ways. You can't spend 90 minutes telling me how bad war is and how you need to have a diplomatic solution and just talk things over, and maybe you'll find that you're not so different after all, and then, by the way, we're going to kill everything in this mountain, and the giant dragon that awakens, we're going to fight it and destroy it with a thermal blast to the exhaust port. I mean, what's the message? It doesn't get to be both ways. You can't have a violent anti-war movie. Yeah, we're fighting for peace. We're fighting for peace. That's basically the message of How to Train Your Dragon. We're fighting for peace. What? We're eating on our hunger strike. I don't understand what you're doing. Yeah, I don't either. Maybe we didn't think this through enough. Anywho, let's burn through these, shall we? Next was 2010's. Look at that. They got How to Train Your Dragon in March, and then Shrek Ever After in May. And Shrek Ever After, Shrek number 4, grosses $752 million. So, listen, folks. This green ogre thing is not going to go away if you continue to support him. You know that stray cat that won't leave your house because you keep feeding it? That's Shrek. That's Shrek. If we keep feeding this ogre, he's going to keep coming around. Katzenberg has said they're not done with Shrek. So I'm appealing to you, the listener. Do not go see any Shrek movie. If it comes out, don't go see it. We got Shrek out of Universal Studios. Now it's Despicable Me Minions or whatever. But, okay, one down. We don't need any more Shrek in our lives. Don't go see the musical. Don't see his movies. Don't buy his products. And I guarantee he'll go away. A lot of these characters just fade away, and that's okay. It's okay to let it go. Listen, you in particular. I'm here for you. I'm going to hold your hand and keep you from your Shrek withdrawals. Oh, he's so cool. He knows pop culture and they play Smash Mouth. We can work through this together. We can do it. Like the werewolf needs to be chained in a room to avoid the full moon, we can do similar things to keep you from seeing and supporting and continuing the monster that is Shrek. All right. Like Smokey the Bear, friends don't let friends Shrek. Thank you. Okay. Next film in November. Boy, 3 movies in 2010. They were really hoping, huh? Megamind. That's the Brad Pitt, Will Ferrell, Tina Fey superhero thing. And again, this is one of those movies. I remember the toys at Toys R Us, and they weren't very good. And the character designs were pretty silly and not attractive. They're just not attractive designs. And I watched this film. I fell asleep. It was so boring. By the time you realize that, spoiler alert, the hero's been playing dead because he was tired of the limelight, it's like, who cares? I don't care. You care? Nobody cares. And Will Ferrell, as game as he is for doing these things, and he showed up at Comic-Con dressed as Megamind for the panel. Like, that's commitment. That takes huge commitment. And God bless him. But it ain't my thing. And I'm a big fan of Tina Fey. But it's maybe one of those things where I need to look at her while she's talking in order to enjoy her performance. That's, I'll do my Chris Gore. That's kind of, I like it. I don't need to have Megan Fox read me an audiobook, if you know what I'm saying. All right, so next film, Kung Fu Panda 2, blah, blah, blah. This time it's personal. Like, look at these sequels all in a row. Kung Fu Panda 2, Puss in Boots, the spin-off of Shrek, and Madagascar 3, all in a row. Crud. And Madagascar 3 is the one that gave us that stupid scene of Chris Rock wearing the rainbow afro wig. Does this wig make my butt look big? Oh, please. Please stop. All of you involved, stop. Please stop making these movies. The next film is Rise of the Guardians. I have a funny story about Rise of the Guardians. I really wanted to like this movie because it had a different take on Santa Claus. It had Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Sandman, and Jack Frost all banding together. Like, that's a great concept. I really enjoy that concept. And the animation looked good, and the Sandman stuff looked beautiful. They got accused, rightfully so, but probably not their fault, of the Santa's elves in this movie copying the Minions from Despicable Me. You can see who won that battle as the Minions get their own movie next summer. And I don't think most people even remember Rise of the Guardians, except I've seen 100 girls dressed as Jack Frost at the various conventions I go to. Why that's the transgender, cross-gender cosplay choice, I don't know. I have no idea. So it's not my thing. But we were at WonderCon 2013, and the front desk gave us a free on-demand movie to watch. So that night in the hotel, we watched Rise of the Guardians. And I'll tell you, hey, DreamWorks, I want to thank you, because this put my kids right to sleep. Like, they don't even remember seeing this movie. They were so asleep. And I guess it's because the movie's just a little boring, It's just a little boring. And that's a bummer, too, because Alec Baldwin's take on Santa was decidedly different. But it never clicked, and it didn't do very well. And what are you going to do? The next film, The Croods, I never even saw this. I have no desire to see a Nicolas Cage animated caveman movie. Like, just say that to yourself. Hey, kids, do you want to go see a Nicolas Cage animated caveman movie? No, Dad, we don't. Hey, good choice, kids. And that's where the conversation ends. The next film, 2013's Turbo. Turbo is famous because it's the Ryan Reynolds voiced racing snail movie. And it's famous because the same weekend that it came out, Ryan Reynolds also had the movie R.I.P.D., which is the ripoff of Men in Black but with ghosts. And both movies tanked spectacularly at the box office. I don't think any actors had two movies that high profile tank at the box office so quickly. Now, Turbo did end up with $282 million worldwide, which is significantly higher than its budget of $127 million. But I can tell you, we're coming up on 2015, and Toys R Us still has Turbo toys on the shelf that nobody wants under any circumstances. And I'm sure Netflix is loving that they greenlit the Turbo animated series before they knew that no kid went to see this movie. Turbo, huh? Racing snail movie. Sounds delightful. Next is 2014. We're here with Mr. Peabody and Sherman. Why does this movie exist? This is one of those where they went shopping at the IP, the intellectual property flea market, and they're like, Peabody and Sherman's cheap. Let's do that. Will it look like the old movie and be as sarcastic and adult oriented? Oh no, it'll be a 3D movie for kids. Well, let's do it. And can we get Patrick Warburton? Because he's in all these movies. Oh, perfect. Are you kidding me? If Peabody and Sherman's not going to be the way it was when we were kids, where it was animated so it felt like a kid's show, but was really not a kid's show because of the deep historical lessons we were learning and the sarcastic way that Peabody ordered Sherman around. It was Mr. Peabody and his boy Sherman, like it was the anti-Snoopy. Where I don't know. I have no desire to ever see this movie. Okay, and the next one is How to Train Your Dragon 2. This was a theatrical trip for us, not because I wanted to, but because my wife got a job at a movie theater for 2 weeks. And during those 2 weeks, we could see any movie we wanted for free. So we got to see How to Train Your Dragon in 3D, $0. Thank you, Visa. $0. You know what? I fell asleep. I guess it was the combined efforts of a snooze fest of a movie and the idea that I had no money riding on it that I went asleep 2 or 3. I just nodded right off. This is so... It just wasn't my thing, And I guess I just have to realize that there are movie products that just simply don't appeal to me. Like Twilight, stuff like that. And this is just one of those things that I just don't get. I don't know why it's popular. I had a full argument, and this is the argument that I talked about last episode that prompted doing these 2 episodes, where this guy Daniel at work was was angry at me that I didn't like these movies, these stupid How to Train Your Dragon movies. And on one hand, I do understand the childhood fantasy of kids and how having a pet dragon would be the greatest thing on earth. When I was a kid, it was Gremlins. We all wanted a Mogwai. So I guess kids today, that's not action-y enough for them. The animal has to be big enough to fly them around. And, I do applaud the brave choice of the first film of having Hiccup lose one of his limbs and having a robotic limb. I get that because then it matched what he had done to the dragon. I get all the symbolism. But it's some of the bigger messages that I don't understand, that I don't get. And How to Train Your Dragon 2 was simply, it has a 92% Rotten Tomatoes rating. So I am in the minority. But the other issue I have, and this is across the board on a lot of these movies, they're just too long. An animated movie at 90 minutes is about right. 86, 87 minutes is perfect. Some of these hit right up to 2 hours, and some of them go over, and it just seems like you're being assaulted. It's an assault on the senses. It's another unwatchable, fast-paced action sequence to get from A to B instead of just having the characters act and talk. Instead, we'll just have an action sequence. So, I get it. These movies are probably your thing. They're not mine. I'm sorry. We're going to differ. But that's what makes life so rich, right? Is a variety of opinions. And maybe somebody will say something that will trigger in you like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Or no, that doesn't. And I always have an open mind. And if somebody had an argument that made these movies better, I would see them in a different light. But I'm set in my ways, and this is just how I feel about this particular roster of films. The current DreamWorks animation slate ends with movie 30. Movie 30, Penguins of Madagascar. I've not seen this movie, so I have no idea. I'm sure it's another silly minion type, smart alecky talking animal movie. It's just not for me. But if you go back to Ants, 1998, and you get to Penguins of Madagascar, 2014, that's 16 years. And 30 animated movies in 16 years is amazing, no matter how you slice it. Katzenberg has had teams of animators working virtually around the clock to get these movies into theaters. And on that, I applaud him, because that's an amazing body of work. And they're not stopping. You know, if you look at their upcoming movies, something called Home, Kung Fu Panda 3, Trolls, Captain Underpants, the Mumbai musical How to Train Your Dragon 3, The Croods 2, Madagascar 4, Puss in Boots 2. Like, that's a lot of movies in production. And you know that these animators are working in little tiny cubicles around the clock on their particular 3 seconds of footage so that we can have a movie. So whether you like them or not, I happen to not like them, you have to admire the perseverance of getting that many movies to the market. You know, 30 films in 16 years is more than Lucasfilm has done in 40. You know, give me a break. Anywho, we're going to wrap up this episode. We're going to do a Homestuck episode tonight or tomorrow, and that'll be up if you're into that kind of thing. We're amazed at the numbers that the Homestuck episodes have been getting, and my kids love talking about it, so I'm going to do them until they run out of things to say, which could be never. But anywho, this is 91 Reasons. My name is Jeff Tucker. Merry Christmas around the world to everyone listening, and any holiday that you celebrate, whatever it is. We hope that you have the greatest one ever. We thank you for taking time to listen to one guy just spew nonsense about movies and life. There are many, many episodes to come in 2015. We're not going to slow down at all. I have some funny ones coming up about the drunks that I lived with. Don Berg for the holidays. How about a Merry Christmas from your friend Don Berg? Merry Christmas. Can you imagine? I don't have to. I experienced Christmas with Don Berg. It was great. Highlights of my life. I'm still formulating a big episode about my father, which will be, I think, pretty interesting because I just have so much information that you really shouldn't have about your parents, about the romance between my mother and father. It's really crazy. Interesting stuff. So if you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is leave us a review on iTunes. We're up to 19 5-star reviews. We just got one from my good friend David Carrero. Thank you so much, David. He said that the episodes really helped him through a pretty tough time in his life. And my God, isn't that what we're here for? Aren't we here so that our experiences can be relayed to somebody else and then they can have their own take on it, or they can live vicariously through you, or just experience a different way of thinking? That's what makes the world go round. So I'm so humbled by those kinds of words, because as I sit here at my desk, I don't know what your perception is of these episodes. I don't know what you think of me. My job is to just keep doing these because I feel like I'm doing something worthwhile. Like people are listening and really getting into it or really enjoying it. And never in the history of mankind has there been an easier way to get your stories across than the right now that we're living in. You know, as the author of 3 self-published books and his own self-published podcast, you don't need anybody's permission to be creative. We're at a time where anybody can do anything they want creative-wise, as long as you've got the time to do it. And if you're creative, you make time. You know? You make time to do it, otherwise you'll go crazy. So that's our philosophy here. Thanks for listening. My books are available on Amazon.com. You can get them in paperback or as a Kindle download for only 99 cents. They are The Sixth Key, The Lost Station, and The Infinite Backward. I'm hard at work on book 4, The Ice Temple, due sometime next year. Coming up, we're going to be at WonderCon Easter weekend in Anaheim, so look for the Sixth Key table there if you want to talk Sixth Key, or more importantly, if you're listening to this, you want to talk 91 Reasons, I'll be there with my 91 Reasons vest that my good friend Aldo made me that I couldn't be prouder to wear. So again, have a safe and happy New Year. As someone who doesn't drink, I'll have a sober New Year like I do always. In fact, I have to be at work at 8 a.m. on New Year's Day, and they schedule me like that because I'm the only guy that doesn't drink. At least I think that's why they do it. Could be because everybody else is working the night shift before. But hey, isn't my excuse to sound more exciting? But thanks for listening. I am the voice you hear. I am Jeff Tucker, and the episodes are all part of something we like to call 91 Reasons.
Thanks for listening to 91 Reasons. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Find us on Facebook. Is anyone even still listening?